On the night of 8th August 1963, a Royal Mail train was traveling from Glasgow to London through the quiet darkness of the English countryside. Inside one of its coaches were heavy mail bags filled with used banknotes, money that would be worth more than £65 million today, or over 790 crore rupees. It was an ordinary journey on an ordinary route, a routine operation repeated countless times before. The crew had no reason to believe this night would be any different. The train's driver, Jack Mills, guided the locomotive steadily along the tracks, the rhythmic clatter of wheels echoing through the still night air. Then, suddenly, a red signal light appeared ahead. That was unusual at that location. Signals rarely changed there unless something was wrong. Following railway rules, Mills slowed the train and brought it to a halt, unaware that this glowing red light was not a warning of danger. It was part of a carefully engineered criminal plan. Welcome back to the Balak channel, everyone. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most daring heists in history, a robbery so bold that it stunned an entire nation and became the stuff of legend. At the time, Britain transported large amounts of cash by rail. Banks across the country sent old banknotes back to London to be sorted and destroyed. It was considered safe and efficient. Security relied on routine and secrecy rather than heavy protection. There were no armed guards on this train, no advanced tracking systems, and very little to stop determined criminals who knew exactly what they were doing. The man behind the plot was Bruce Reynolds, a career criminal with big ambitions. He didn't want small jobs anymore. He wanted one massive score that would change his life forever. Reynolds gathered a team of experienced men, drivers, planners, and hardened criminals who understood discipline. These weren't reckless amateurs. They planned carefully, spoke little, and stayed out of sight. For months, the group studied railway schedules and observed how mail trains operated. They learned where trains slowed down and how signal systems worked. Eventually, they identified the perfect location, a remote stretch of track near Bridego Bridge, about 40 miles from London. It was dark, isolated, and close to roads that would allow a fast escape. Their plan relied not on violence, but on deception. They tampered with the railway signal system so the light would turn red, forcing the train to stop exactly where they wanted it. Railway drivers were trained to obey signals without question. If a light turned red, you stopped, no matter what. As the train sat motionless on the tracks, shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. The gang moved quickly, wearing gloves and masks. They overwhelmed the crew and took control of the situation within minutes. Jack Mills was struck during the confrontation, an injury that would later draw strong public sympathy and outrage. The robbers uncoupled the engine and the first carriage, which contained the valuable cargo, and drove it forward to Bridego Bridge, where their trucks were waiting below. Inside were 120 mail bags packed with cash. Each bag was heavy and awkward to handle, but the gang worked with speed and precision, forming a chain to pass the sacks down into their vehicles. Time was critical. Every second increased the risk of discovery, yet they remained calm and focused. In less than an hour, they had transferred millions of pounds into their trucks. They didn't even take everything. There wasn't enough time or space. When they were done, they disappeared into the night, leaving behind a stunned crew and one of the most shocking crime scenes Britain had ever seen. The gang drove to a rural hideout known as Leatherslade Farm, rented under a false name. There, the tension finally broke. They dumped the stolen money onto the floor in huge piles and began counting. For men used to small-time crime, the sight must have felt unreal. They had pulled off the biggest train robbery of their era. But success made them careless. Instead of vanishing immediately, they stayed at the farmhouse longer than they should have.
They handled objects without gloves, left behind food packaging, and even played games. They believed their planning had been perfect. They underestimated the scale of the investigation that was about to begin. When news of the robbery reached the public, Britain was stunned. A mail train had been stopped. Millions had vanished. The government demanded swift action. Police forces across the country launched a massive manhunt. Roadblocks were set up. Known criminals were questioned. Forensic teams examined every clue. The breakthrough came when police discovered the farmhouse hideout. Inside, they found fingerprints and other evidence linking the location to known offenders. That discovery changed everything. Slowly but surely, detectives identified members of the gang and began making arrests. The trial captivated the nation. Newspapers covered every detail. The judge handed down severe sentences, with several robbers receiving 30 years in prison, an unusually harsh punishment at the time, meant to send a strong warning. Yet the story didn't end there. Some gang members escaped or fled abroad. Ronnie Biggs became internationally famous after escaping from prison and living in Brazil for decades, giving interviews and becoming a strange kind of outlaw celebrity. Bruce Reynolds also spent years on the run before eventually being captured. These escapes added to the legend, turning criminals into figures of fascination. Behind the drama, however, were serious consequences. The injured train driver never fully recovered. The robbery exposed major weaknesses in how money was transported, leading to sweeping security reforms. Armored vehicles replaced many rail shipments, and forensic science became a stronger tool in criminal investigations.
As of today, all 15 members have passed away, and that's how the Great Train Robbery became a turning point in British criminal history. It marked the end of an era. Thanks for watching. God bless you all.